This is Tom Fox. I'm the Compliance Evangelist. I would like to welcome you to an exciting new series I'm putting on each month in 2017. In the month of January, I'm going to go through 30 days to a better compliance program. So each day I will detail some part of a compliance program that you can utilize to help you improve to have a best practices compliance program for 2017. With the operationalization of compliance mandated by the Department of Justice in the form of their Compliance Counsel, Wei Chin, and incorporated into the FCPA pilot program announced by the Department of Justice in April 2016, it's more important than ever that you upgrade your compliance program and show how you've operationalized. In this series, I'm going to help you do that. I hope you will enjoy this series. I hope you will join me, and I look forward to this journey with you. This is Tom Fox. Welcome to day 28 of 30 days to a better compliance program. Today, the desktop risk assessment. Both the Department of Justice and Securities and Exchange Commission make clear the need for a risk assessment to inform your compliance program. I believe that most, if not all, CCOs and compliance practitioners understand this well-articulated need. The FCPA guidance could not have been clearer when it stated assessment of risk is fundamental to developing a strong compliance program and is another factor the Department of Justice and Securities and Exchange Commission will evaluate when assessing a company's compliance program. While many compliance practitioners have difficulty getting their collective arms around what is required for a risk assessment and then precisely how to use it, the FCPA guidance makes clear there is no one-size-fits-all for about anything in an effective compliance program. One type of risk assessment can consist of a full-blown worldwide exercise where teams of lawyers and fiscal consultants travel around the globe interviewing and auditing. Of course, this can be a notoriously expensive exercise. However, if there is one thing I've learned as a lawyer, which also applies to a compliance practitioner, is that you're only limited by your imagination. So using your FCPA guidance, no one-size-fits-all prescription, I would submit this is also true for risk assessments. If you try to assess other areas annually, or you might try to assess other areas annually, though a more focused, limited assessment, while literally staying at your desk and not traveling away from your corporate headquarters. Some of the areas such a desktop risk assessment could inquire into might be the following. Are resources adequate to sustain a culture of compliance? How are the risks in the C-suite and the boardroom being addressed? What are the FCPA risks related to the supply chain? How is risk being examined and due diligence performed at the vendor agent level? How is that risk being managed? Is the documentation adequate to support the program for regulatory purposes? Is culture, attitude, and knowledge measured? If so, how can we use that information to enhance the compliance program going forward? Disciplinary guidelines. Do they exist, and has anyone ever been terminated or disciplined for violating a policy? Communication of information and findings. Are escalation protocols appropriate? What are the opportunities to improve compliance? There are a variety of materials that you can review from or at a company that can facilitate such a desktop risk assessment. You can review your company's policies and written guidelines by reviewing policies, procedures, and guidelines to ensure that the compliance program is tailored to address specific risks such as gifts, hospitality, entertainment, travel, political, and charitable donations, or indeed other promotional activities. You can assess your company's senior management support for your compliance efforts through interviews of high-level employees, such as a chief financial officer, the general counsel, the head of sales, the chief executive officer, all board members, audit and compliance subcommittee members, to assess tone at the top and gain their actual knowledge about your compliance program and indeed the broader FCPA. You can examine resources dedicated to compliance and also seek to understand the compliance expectation the top management is communicating to its employee base. Finally, you can gauge operational responsibilities for compliance. Such a review would lead to the next level of assessment, which would be generally labeled as communications within an organization regarding compliance. You can do this by assessing the compliance policy communications to employees, but even more so by reviewing such materials as compliance training and certification that employees might have in their files. If you do not yet do so, you should take a look at statements by senior management regarding compliance, such as actions relating to terminating employees who do business in compliance, yet do not make their quarterly, semi, or annual numbers in budget projections. A key element of a best practices compliance program is internal and anonymous reporting. This means you need to review the mechanisms on the reporting of suspected compliance violations and the actions taken on any internal reports, including follow-ups to the reported employees. You should assess whether those employees who are seeking guidance on compliance for their day-to-day business dealings are receiving those, not only adequately, but in a timely manner. Once again, you can not be Dr. No from the land of no. I do not think there is any dispute that third parties continue to represent the highest risk to most companies under the FCPA, so a thorough review of your due diligence program is certainly something that should be part of any risk assessment, including a desktop risk assessment. But more than simply a review of the procedures for due diligence on your third-party intermediaries, you should consider the compliance procedures in place for your company's mergers and acquisition team, focusing on the pre-acquisition phase. One area that I do not think gets enough play is what might be called employee commitment to your compliance regime. So here you may want to look at your compliance policies regarding employee incentives for compliance. But just as you look at the carrots to achieve compliance with your compliance program, you should also look at the stick in the form of disciplinary procedures for violations. This means you should see if there are any disciplinary actions for employee compliance violations and then determine if such discipline has been applied uniformly. If you discipline top salespeople in Brazil, you have to discipline your top sales folks in the United States for the same or similar violations. This list is not intended to be a complete list of items, but you can pick and choose to form some type of desktop risk assessment, as hopefully you can see some of the areas you can assess. My suggestion is that you try identifying and focusing on core compliance components in your organization. Obviously, there are a million things you could fix. However, you cannot fix everything, so you must make a decision about your priorities and then act upon them. A desktop risk assessment will help you do so. If you perform a desktop risk assessment with a full worldwide risk assessment every 2 years or so, you should be in a good position to keep abreast of any compliance issues that may change or provide greater risk, and therefore you would need to provide greater risk management. Moreover, if funds or resources do become available to you in your compliance program, you will have a stronger program and one which can move towards best in class. Do not forget the FCPA guidance ends with a section on risk with the following. When assessing a company's compliance program, the DOJ and SEC take into account whether and to what degree a company analyzes and addresses the particular risk it faces. By using the desktop risk assessment, you can answer any regulator who asks what you have done to manage the risks in your company by using the resources and tools available to you. So what are the 3 key takeaways from day 28? First and foremost, and this really applies to every day of the 30 days to a better compliance program, you're only limited by your imagination. You are not constrained to follow any specific rules. If you can think of a better, more efficient, less costly, or other way to do something, you can use that. And the desktop risk assessment certainly falls into this position. Second, you should only use a desktop risk assessment in conjunction with a full-blown risk assessment done, worldwide risk assessment done every couple of years. So it's important that this does not become your only tool to assess your risks going forward. 3, and never forget that a risk assessment not only helps you to assess your risk, but it's there to provide a roadmap or a gap analysis, rather, that allows you to remediate, and the roadmap demonstrating what your priorities should be and how you should remediate based on that roadmap. Once again, the regulators want to see that you've taken a look at your risks, figured out what they are, and then move to remediate those. This does not mean you have to do them all at once, but it does mean that you need to prioritize them by risk ranking and then remediate in a reasonable time thereafter. This is Tom Fox. Thank you very much for listening to Day 28, and I hope you will join me for Day 29 of 30 Days to a More Effective Compliance Program.